Greetings and welcome to another episode of Talking IFA with me, Babalawo Salako. Today I wanted to talk to you about a topic called self-initiation. Is it possible? It's come to me, and I've noticed a lot recently, things going on in which they say people are initiating themselves into Ifá, is whether they're trying to initiate as an Ifá priest, a Babalawo, or Iyin Ifá, or any other Orisha other than Oromila, Batala, Oshun, etc. So I wanted to give my thoughts on that and talk to you about what I found. So let's talk.
Greetings. I'm Babalawo Salako. I was initiated as a priest of Ifá and Obatala in Nigeria in 2006, and I've been practicing the Ifá Orisha religion for over 30 years now. My mission is simple: to help those who are new to the religion or lost in the religion. So if that's you, then buckle up and join me. This is Talking Ifá.
So I did a little research because I've been hearing for a while about these people that are saying they're self-initiating. I found a couple of papers on the topic. I've got anecdotal stories from Aluo and others. So I decided I wanted to do a two-part series on this. So this one, self-initiation, is it possible? And the second one, the next one I'm going to do is self-initiation, pro or con. So in this one, I'm just going to talk a little bit about what it is, what I've found that it is, and I'm going to read through here and give my thoughts on it. So let's get started. So here this says, in the Yoruba-derived spiritual traditions of Ifá, a divination and philosophical system, that's spiritual system, religious system, and other things. And then they said Orisha worship, that's all part of it. Devotion to deities like Oshun, Oromila, Obatala, Kabisi, Shango, Ogun, etc. Becoming a priest, because first of all, I'm talking about getting initiated, not just practicing. There's a lot of people who practice the religion and they're not initiated as a priest. Everyone does not have to become a priest, or nor should everyone become a priest. But I'm speaking from the point of view, if you're thinking about becoming a priest, since I'm talking to my target here, the main people I'm trying to focus on helping, of course, are those who are new to the religion or are lost in the religion, meaning they started and then they became orphaned and they're kind of lost. They're in a place where they don't have any guidance or direction. So I'm just trying to help those people out primarily, but anyone else is welcome to join this journey. So here it says, becoming a priest, such as a Babalawo or an Ifá diviner or Iyan Ifá, female Ifá priest, or priest of any other Orisha, like I said, traditionally requires rigorous initiation processes guided by established elders or lineages. These include ceremonies like Itefa, which is a full Ifá initiation, Ishefa, which is receiving a hand Ifá, or any other specific Orisha that you're initiated to, often involving divination, Ebal sacrifices, extensive training, and years of apprenticeship to ensure spiritual alignment. If it's Ifá, knowledge of Odu, sacred verses, and ethical practices. However, in recent decades, particularly in the Western societies and the diaspora, e.g. the United States, Europe, etc., a growing trend, sometimes loosely called a movement, has emerged where individuals attempt self-initiation. This involves bypassing traditional so-called, this is what they're calling, gatekeepers, and performing rites themselves, often drawing from books, online resources, dreams, or just personal intuition to claim priesthood status in Ifa or to devotion to any other Orisha other than just Ifa. There's a lot to unpack there, but let me hit a few. One of the things you'll notice here is that becoming a priest requires training, study, a lot of training and study. Training from experienced priests. In addition, and then also look at the target where this is happening. Like I'm here in the United States, I'm in Atlanta, Georgia. But, over here, but it's happening a lot of different places outside of Africa, Nigeria or Yoruba land. Now, let's look at what they're calling people who are the people that bring you in, train you, assist you, initiate you. They're calling people like myself gatekeepers. Like we're blocking someone's access to becoming a priest, and they feel like they can perform the rites themselves, again, without any training, without the necessary ashe, that's I'll get to later, but they can just perform it themselves like no one else is needed, often drawing from books. Now let me talk about the book thing. Now I always tell people to be very careful about books. There's a lot of books out there on this religion and practice and culture, but a lot of them are misleading. They give misleading and false information. They may be coming from a person that you may not know. You look at the book and you see a Yoruba name as the author and you think it has credibility, but they may be a Christian or a Muslim who's come into Ifa, and then they bring their religion of Islam with them or their Christian values and religion into it, and they try to incorporate it into it. Let me give you an example. I'm not going to name the book or the author, but there's one book that they have a lot of verses in Odu, which a lot of the ones I've seen, some are valid Ifa essay or verses, but then they corrupt them with their value system. This particular person who wrote this book is Muslim, but it doesn't matter. For instance, there's a saying or phrase in many Ifa essay or verses that goes like this. I'll say the English version of it. So it's when the client has gotten a message and the direction from the diviner, and then the outcome is, but first of all, they are prescribed ebal or sacrifices. They perform those sacrifices, the ones who have performed them, and then they reap the blessings of doing so. And their issues that they wanted addressed are addressed to their satisfaction. The saying in a lot of verses is that the client is praising their Babalawo. They praise their Babalawo. The next line is, and then their Babalawo is praising Ifa. And then the third is it's exactly as Ifa said, something of that nature. That's the normal thing in a valid Odu essay verse. But what I found in this person's book is they added a line, and they added it throughout the book, and it was the client was praising their Babalawo was praising Ifá, and Ifá was praising God. Okay, that is not the verse. They're adding to the verses themselves based on the religious background they brought in. Ifá was praising God is not, that's nowhere in a valid Ifá verse. But if you're new to the religion and you buy a book like that and you're reading, you don't know that, and there's no way you would know what is valid and what is invalid when it comes to Ifá verses. And why is that even important at all, you might think? Because when they say God, or they may say Olodumare, in true Ifá Orisha practice, you do not worship Olodumare directly. There's no offerings to Olodumare. You don't do prayers and chants to Olodumare. None of that. You worship and go through the Orisha. So therefore, you would never say in a verse that Ifá was praising Olodumare or Ifá was praising God. Okay? So that's just one example. So I won't go off too much more in a tangent there. So let's look at this some more. The part about gatekeepers. They're implying that people are being blocked from getting initiated. But the truth of the matter is, I don't know any priest in Ifá, whether you're, priest of Ifá or Obatala, Oshun, Ogun, etc., that are blocking people from getting initiated to that Orisha. People will assist you. I've participated in countless initiations to Ifá, and I don't know any time we blocked anybody from being initiated. So where is that coming from? What's the problem? Well, the problem is it costs money, and it's expensive to get initiated. And what it is many people don't want to pay the money to get initiated. So therefore they make it appear when they say gatekeepers like they're being blocked from getting initiated. They're not getting blocked from getting initiated. Okay? Or they don't want to do the work. Or they say, okay, you need to, pay the money to get initiated. You need to study. You need to blah, blah, blah. Okay? That's something they just don't want to do. Okay? The other thing is performing rites themselves. And they think they're learning the rites from books. I don't know any book that contains all of the necessary rites and steps to initiate someone. Most people don't put that in books. They may put high-level stuff in books and overall, and you think you have all of the details, but you don't. None of that is in a book. You're not going to get all of that in a book. It's the same thing I always wondered when I studied history and African history, and I studied ancient Kemet, or ancient Egypt. And they have the book of coming forth, it's coming forth, something about coming forth from night to day or by night to day or something like that. Or they call it the Book of the Dead. And I remember, and I don't want to get into any, I'm not throwing shade on anyone, I'm just saying my own thoughts. When I used to see, there was a group, I'm not going to call their name, who were saying that they were practicing ancient Kemet, ancient Egyptian religion. And they were, I don't know if they were, it seemed like they were initiating people and doing all these things. And even though I studied it and I was fascinated with it, I never believed I could practice ancient Kemet religion, because just reading a book is not going to teach you how to really practice a religion. You don't know everything that goes on in rites and rituals and offerings and herbs and all that stuff, or whatever's needed. The ashe, you don't have all of that. I wasn't even going to dabble into that and say that I'm practicing ancient Commission, or however you want to announce it, religion, from just reading a book. Same with Yoruba religion. Ifá, you can't just read a book and know exactly what to do. Nor will you have the ashe to do so. So, drawing from books and dreams and etc. Let me give you another example of that. This is also the reason why people like us in the religion find this extremely disrespectful, is because I don't see people saying that they self-ordain themselves as the Pope or Catholic priest or this, that, and the other without going through the proper processes or training or certification or anything like that. They just walk up one day and say, oh, well, I'm a Catholic priest. I'm opening up my church. And, I don't see anybody doing that. Or if, Ifá, being an Ifá priest, you also deal with medicine, Ifá medicine. I don't see people, there might be some people illegitimately try to do that and they get arrested, saying they're a heart surgeon. And you just wake up and say, oh, I had a dream, or I had intuition, or I read a book, and I didn't go to medical school for all those years to train. I'm a heart surgeon now. Is that ridiculous, or is it not ridiculous? But for some reason, people feel like they can disrespect Yoruba religion and just say, oh, well, yeah, you guys went through all this training, you've done this, you've got the ashe, and I'm just going to have a dream or intuition, or I'm going to read a book, and now I'm going to initiate myself, and now I'm going to say I'm a priest. I don't see people doing that in other things. I don't see you doing that in Hindu religion, Buddhism. I don't see it, right? Or you read a book and now in Islam you're an imam, or you're this, that, and the other, and with no, I think some of that has to do with, in the West, I call it meism versus weism. In the West, meism is practiced. Narcissism, me. I have to have what I want. I don't care about anybody else. I don't have respect for anybody else. I just want something, so I'm going to get it any way I can. That's what's taught here. Whereas in cultures like Africa or Asia or other places, they've traditionally practiced weism, communalism, groupism, where, it's the group, it's the family, it's the village. We work together. Ubuntu. We all are one together, and we do things together. That's not a value system here, because if it was, I don't see people would be doing this, who's saying they're priests. So let's go further. This trend is not a formalized organization, but a diffuse cultural shift. So let me go a little further here. It's amplified by globalization, the internet, and critiques of hierarchical structures. It reflects broader themes in modern spirituality, such as individualism and anti-authoritarianism, but is heavily debated within the community. Proponents view it as democratizing access to ancient wisdom, while critics rooted in traditional Yoruba Isheshe perspectives see it as invalid, disrespectful, and spiritually perilous. Okay, so this is kind of what I was just saying, but let's look at that for a second. Individualism. This is what I said. Like I call it meism, individualism. And this whole anti-authoritarianism. Okay, but looking at priests who are already here as authoritarians who are trying to block you from your spiritual path, to me is totally invalid, incorrect, and false, because I do not see that. We're here to help people on their path. We're not trying to block people. We train and want people to do things the correct way. But again, why are people into this creating conflict where there's no conflict? Trying to just, invent walls in front of themselves that they say exist, that don't exist, in my opinion. Now here where it says spiritually perilous, let me address that. Why and how would self-initiation be spiritually perilous? Well, for one of the reasons is there are people who do this and say they initiated themselves, and then they go out and get clients, and then they start doing spiritual work for them that they read in the book. They say they're divining for them. They don't understand divination. They don't really know. They don't have the ashe to deal with the Orisha, let alone to invoke the Orisha, to be there with them during a divination. But this is the thing, to me, and that's why I brought up medicine, being a doctor. For us in here doing this, and at least me, I'm not going to speak for everyone, I take this very, very, very seriously. Because when somebody comes to divine with me, they're putting their faith and their life into my hands. And when I say their life, you come and divine for direction in life. Say, for instance, you're thinking about changing careers, or you want to open a business, or changing jobs, or getting married to someone, or having a certain change in your health, diet, or procedure, or a certain health procedure, or et cetera, et cetera. These are very serious things, because if somebody comes to you and says, okay, I'm thinking about quitting my job, and this person, say, is married and has a family that they're taking care of, but they say they have this urge that they want to quit their job and open this business, and they're coming to me to divine to see what Ifá is saying about it. Well, whatever comes in that divination is going to affect their life. So if they say, okay, I'm going to switch off, quit my job and go here, but if I wasn't a real diviner with real ashe training, and I'm just out here just making up stuff, and they believe me and they follow it, and then their life crashes, their business fails, they lose their home, they lose their wife or husband, they have all this turmoil in their lives because of me. I don't want to have that kind of guilt on my head. I wouldn't want to. And maybe these people are, like they said, individual and narcissistic, and they don't care. Maybe they don't care how what they do affects your life. Because to me, I don't see how people who are saying that they're self-initiating can really care about other people and what they're doing to other people, possibly doing to other people. That could be very harmful. Again, there's another part that makes it spiritually perilous. This is something that, especially people who come from Christianity or Islam, would have difficult time understanding or perceiving, or could have it. Because, for instance, in Christianity, there's this whole concept of only. This is a jealous God. This is the only one. You just have to worship Jesus, and Jesus is going to save you. And all these any other entity you deal with is a demon and evil. So beaten into our heads is this concept of this is the only, entity, spiritual entity that exists or that we need to deal with. But in African spiritual traditions, not just in Ifá, but all over, there's the recognition that the world consists of all kinds of thousands of spiritual entities, different kind of entities that derive from humans, entities from nature. And so I remember reading a book from an author from the Congo years ago. I can't remember the name of the book that I have. I have it in my library, but he said that when you look at it, what's happening, what the African does is not try to contain or encompass everything in the universe spiritually, but they tap into a part of it and go to the root and tap into it, the source from there, and work with it from there. But it's not encompassing the whole 360 degrees. In Ifá is the same thing. In Ifá, for instance, let me give an example of the Orisha. With the Orisha, we say there are 400 plus 1 Orisha. There are 200 plus 1 Ajogun. Altogether 600 plus 1 Irumale. Now the plus 1 does not mean that there's 401 Orisha. The plus 1 is for expansion and increasing. It means that they're acknowledging that there's a lot of other deities out here, not just the 400 Orisha that are identified in Ifá. And so, for instance, if you are a Yoruba person and you get married to somebody from a Zulu person, for instance, say you're a Yoruba man and you're marrying a Zulu woman. Well, what you would do is you would combine and do both. You would say, okay, the husband say, these are my Orisha, my deities that I worship. Who do you have any family deities that you worship in your family lineage? And they say, yes, they're practicing traditional Zulu religion and they have entities that the wife family worships. So he says, okay, wonderful. So we'll worship both. So now the husband will worship his Orisha plus the deities that from his wife's family, and his wife would worship also the Orisha and hers. That's expansion. That's the plus 1. It's acknowledging that the Orisha that we worship in Ifá do not encompass all deities in the world. Having said that, that's when you come out here and you do things spiritually. So let me get into spells, for instance, witchcraft. I've gone through working with someone before who went out online and found spells, and whether they're love spells to get somebody to fall in love with you or whatever. They go out online and find these spells on the internet. Then they just come and do them. But what they don't realize is whenever you're tapping into spiritual entities and you're asking for their help with something, there's reciprocation involved, meaning you have to pay for everything and anything that you get in life. Nothing is free. So if you're going and doing a spell, meaning you're trying to ask and invoke some spiritual entity to help you, and most of the time when you're doing these spells, you don't even know what entity or entities you're invoking. You're just asking for help and do a spell and see if it works. Well, what you're doing is you're piling up debt, spiritual debt, meaning you have bills that you owe. These spiritual entities expect to get paid. So what I had to do, for instance, with a person, I had to work for at least 2 years trying to clean up and do all kinds of divinations and their bowls because these spiritual entities were after this person. And they were blocking things for them and kept coming up in divinations because they didn't know what entities they were dealing with. They don't know what debts they had, and they didn't know how to pay the debts. So when you go out here, for instance, let's say Oshun or Yemoja, for instance. Oshun has a river in Nigeria. Yemoja is a river goddess in Nigeria. Oya has a river in Nigeria. Okay. So like what Baba Kola Abambola says, that river that's in Nigeria for Oshun or Yemoja, that's where it is. So when you're over here in the United States and people will go, like for instance, near me there's a river called the Yellow River. Now because it's called the Yellow River, a lot of people would come out and do ceremonies to Oshun and offerings to Oshun at the Yellow River because it's called the Yellow River, so they want to tie it to Oshun. I'm not saying you can't go to the river and do offerings to Oshun, but there's a way of doing it, meaning you have to bring the ashe of Oshun with you, and you do it there. Just going to the river and saying, oh, I'm doing this to Oshun and I'm invoking Oshun at this river, that doesn't work. Oshun isn't automatically at that river. Yemoja isn't at that river. But that river probably has at least one spiritual entity that's in that river. And when you come there and you're doing offerings, calling on Oshun or calling on someone else, you don't know how that's going to play. That entity that's there who is not Oshun may say, great, these people are coming here doing offerings. They're calling me another name that's not me, but I'm going to accept the offering and bless them anyway. Or that entity could say, well, they're coming and giving me an offering, and that offering they're giving that's not me. They're calling on some other entity, and that's offending me. Or even worse, that entity could say that what they're offering is one of my taboos. That's my taboo. I hate that offering. I'm going to get angry at these people for giving that offering, which is my taboo to me, when the person is giving it and thinking they're giving it to Oshun, for instance, but they're not giving it to Oshun if they didn't bring the icons of Oshun with them to the river to have that ashe of Oshun there and just present the offering to Oshun at the river. So in that light, if you're saying you self-initiated and you're doing rites and ceremonies, you don't know what spirit you're dealing with or invoking. If you don't have the ashe of a particular Orisha, and you're just making stuff up and saying, I read a book, and so I'm going to say, I feel like I'm an Oshun person, so I'm calling on Oshun, and I said Oshun came to me in a dream, so therefore I'm initiating Oshun. Well, how do you know it was Oshun that came to you in a dream? Because in my experience, in my understanding, most of the time when entities come to you in dreams, they're mostly ancestor spirits or Egbe that come to you in dreams. There could be other spirits that come to you in dreams, but, and I'm not going to say Orisha never can come to you in dreams. But how do you know? You may believe and think you know that that's that Orisha. Now, if you're a person who's initiated to an Orisha and has the ashe of that Orisha, then, there may be more of a chance that that Orisha may come to you in a dream. I'm not sure. But if you're not, and you saying that, oh, you had a dream about something or something, and you believed it was a spiritual entity that came to you, how do you know who that is? You're taking risks there. And then, because you really don't know who that is. You really don't know what their taboos are. You really don't know what kind of offerings they like. You really don't know how to invoke them, etc., etc. So you may be invoking a human spirit thinking it's an Orisha. You may be invoking a dark human spirit or some other spirit, and you think it's Oshun or Obatala or Orunmila or someone else. So that's what, in my opinion, what's meant by spiritually perilous. But so my opinion, bottom line, is it possible, in my opinion, is it possible to self-initiate? Well, one more thing, one other topic that I would say about this. Some people make the argument, well, it all had to start somewhere. In the beginning, there had to be somebody or some people who started worshiping Orunmila, and they weren't initiated, or they started worshiping Oshun or Batala and they weren't initiated, the first people. So why can't I do that? Well, let me give my opinions on that, my thoughts on that. So let's use that argument. In the beginning, there was people that did this and they weren't initiated. Okay. Let's just kind of hypothetically think of how that could have happened. So let's say that you were a people, the Yoruba people, for instance, and you lived by a river. And you were getting blessed by that river. And over time, you felt the spiritual energy of that river. And so you started trying to do things, and over time experimenting. You were getting blessings from the river. You started giving offerings and seeing if you were getting more blessings back. And then over time you're experimenting and you give certain offerings and you really don't get the blessings back. Then you give others, and all of a sudden blessings coming, and you say, oh, this is something that this spirit must really like. And these things they may not like. And over time and years they're doing this. And then they say, okay, we're going to give this spirit of this river a name. And let's say we call this river name Oshun. And in this story, I'm giving a story of how things could have occurred. And so you name the entity in that river. So you say, okay, we're going to call this Oshun, and we're going to come and start doing prayers to the entity that we're calling Oshun. And we found these are the things Oshun likes, and we found, oh, well, Oshun really helps a person come and wanted to have children. They were barren, and then they gave the offerings to Oshun, and then they were able to get pregnant. And then they started saying, well, Oshun really helps pregnant people, and they do this over years and years and years of experimentation. Okay. Now, someone 1,000 years later is in another part of the world, and they hear about Oshun and the blessings of Oshun in Yoruba land, and then they go to a river by them, and they say, I had a dream that I'm going to initiate myself as a priest of Oshun, and I'm going to be able to invoke Oshun and worship Oshun over here, and I'm going to teach myself how to do it. And you go to a river or wherever and you start doing these things. What are the chances that you are able to invoke the exact spirit that's way over in Nigeria at the river, that Oshun's river, and you're going to be able to just connect with that same spirit, and you're sure you are, and you don't have anybody else who's already connected with that Orisha and has that Ashe on their head, and that they can transfer some of it to you and make sure that the Ashe that you're dealing with is Oshun. You're just going to create it on your own from scratch somewhere else in another part of the world. To me, I don't believe that's possible. And if you think it's possible, maybe it's like finding a needle in a haystack. I don't see how that would really be possible. You may be able to connect with some spirit, but I don't believe you really know who that spirit is. Now, if you wanted to invent a new age and create a new, get in touch with a new entity, and you go somewhere to a river in Georgia or Alabama and by where you live, and you start the same process. You start doing prayers there and doing offerings and seeing which offerings get your prayers answered, and you give that entity a name, and okay, that's possible. I can see that. But it's like me sitting here in Georgia, and I go and read a book about a Hindu god, one of the Hindu gods, say, I don't know, Krishna or somebody. And I read up on Krishna. And then I say, okay, I'm initiated as a priest of Krishna, and I'm going to initiate myself, and I'm just going to just read some books and start saying that I'm practicing Hinduism and I'm a Hindu priest now. Okay? That would be not only totally disrespectful to Hindu religion, it would be, is that even really possible to do? You see what I mean? So that's my thoughts on that. So again, the bottom line, my vote, my opinion is that no, I don't believe self-initiation is really possible. Now, one other thing that happens in Ifá, for instance, one of the steps, and I'm not going to go into all of the steps in the Ifá initiation, Itefa, but one of the steps is to divine so that you can get the Oluo who's leading the initiation for you, some of their ashe, their formula from their king to your king that they consecrate for you. Now, if you self-initiate, you don't have any ashe. You don't have any Ifá ashe. You don't have anybody to give it to you. You're just saying you're going to create it. You're going to consecrate, and you don't really know how to consecrate a king. But you're going to get a king. You're going to read a book, supposedly. I don't really know of any off the top of my head. There may be somebody that's put in the book how to consecrate and prepare and consecrate a king. I've never seen it. Maybe it exists. But if you don't have the ashe to begin with, you're saying that you're going to create it from scratch. And you know that the so-called ashe that you create is Ifá, is for Romula. And that now you are a Ifá priest. You're a Babalawo or a Ifá, or you're an Obatala priest, or et cetera, et cetera. I don't see how that's possible. The danger is not only that you don't know what kind of spirits that you're invoking around you, but also the harm that you can bring to people that if you go out and start trying to get clients, or you start going out and getting clients and starting guiding and directing them, and you don't have the proper ashe, you don't have the proper training, just please think about that. So if you're new to the religion or orphaned in the religion, one of the things you should always do if you come in contact with a priest that you may be thinking about working with is you have to investigate them and inquire upon them on what is their lineage, who is their lineage, who trained them, who initiated them, where did they get initiated. And if they can't tell you that, or if they just come out and tell you they self-initiated, I don't know if that's what they're doing, or if they're lying to you, then you automatically, that's a character issue. If they're going to lie to you and tell you that they came from somewhere they didn't and they really self-initiated, but at least ask and inquire who are their people, where do they come from, who initiated them, where are their training. If you don't get that information, or if they don't have it, then I would steer the other way. I would even run. But because you're putting the trust of your life and how it's going to guide you in your life and the direction you go and the things you're going to do and the choices you're going to make with that person or persons. So that's all I have to say about that on this one, but I ask that you join my next one, where I'm going to go pro or con on self-initiation. But on this one, do I think it's possible? I don't believe it's possible in general, not into existing entities or like existing orishas, for instance, in Ifá. But again, if you're going out somewhere and there's a big, large, old, ancient tree and it has its own spirit, and you go and start doing prayers and offerings to that tree, and you give that spirit of that tree a name, and you start worshiping that spirit of that tree, and then you start getting blessings, and then you want to self-initiate yourself as a priest of the spirit of that tree, okay, that's maybe possible. Okay, in that format, that may be possible. You may be the expert of that tree, the priest of that tree. You know the spirit of that tree better than anyone else. You could bring other people there, train them and teach them on how to be priests for that spirit of that tree. But for existing entities like the Orisha, who were born in Ile-Ife or in Nigeria, and you're somewhere else, say the United States or Europe or wherever, and then you just believe that you don't have to tie yourself to people who are tied back to Nigeria, either directly through Nigerian priests or indirectly through Cuban or Brazilian priests, that back when it started with them, there were people from Nigeria who came there in slavery that brought the religion and the Ashe and carried it through them. If you don't have some kind of lineage in which the Ashe of those entities came through, then I don't believe that you can self-initiate to those Orisha. That's just my opinion. So anyway, I hope that you got something out of this, and that you will stay tuned for my next episode. Also, if you need any work done, or you had questions, you could always reach out to me. Normally in the description section, I have my contact information. Also, I'm coming out again. I did an Ifá Orisha planner about 3 years ago, and now I'm getting ready to bring it back. People have been asking me about it, so that should be available soon for 2026. So look out for that. So everyone, be blessed. Ireo, Odabo.